Welcome everybody. Wonderful to have such a captive audience for our fourth RD&E plan launch. On behalf of AgriFutures Australia, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wiradjuri people here in Wagga, where I'm seated today, and of all the lands that you join us today from, and to pay my respect to their elders past, present and future, and further extend that respect to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands that may be present with us here online today. So my name is Olivia Reynolds. I'm the Senior Manager for our Emerging Industries. Within AgriFutures Australia, we are the only research and development corporation of the 15 that exist that has a remit to invest in our emerging industries. And I'm really excited to bring you together today to hear the launch of two of our research, development and extension plans. One is for lavender and the other is for our emerging insect technology industry. I would also like to warmly welcome our guest speaker that we will hear from also today. So welcome to everybody. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. We're going to be using the chat function today, given there is such a large number of people online. We will ask that you place any questions into the chat and we will manage it via the chat as opposed to using the hands or verbal speaking today. If everyone could just practice, using your mute button, please, ensuring that when you join us or rejoin us, if you happen to drop out, that your mute button is on, just so that we can keep the flow for the talkers moving forth. And as I know there's people continually joining us, please note we will be recording this session. If you don't wish to be identified, please turn off your camera and also de-identify yourself if you don't wish to be identified online. This will be shared with all those that have registered and it will be placed on our YouTube channel. So without too much further ado, I would like to introduce our facilitator for the day, who is Al Fullerton. Al is an agricultural investment manager who has spent much of his career dedicated to global food security and sustainability and has been based across both Asia and Australia, and joins us today from the sunny Sunshine Coast. Welcome, Al.
Thanks, Olivia. Lovely to be here, and thank you all for joining us today. And I know a lot of people will also be following up the webinar afterwards. This is the fourth webinar in our series. I've had the privilege of moderating all four, and talk about sort of saving some. There's we're really lucky today to have these two industries, both very sort of diverse and different, but really, a fascinating opportunity for Australian agriculture and products that have been around for many years, but with new applications and use of them. It's interesting. There's probably, certainly not in my lifetime, never been such a focus globally on the origination of products. For now, there's such a focus on where things are coming from, how they're originated, grown, sourced. And it's a time where there's the opportunity for new and emerging industries that may well have been operating in the background for some years can really start coming forward and shining, and we've seen that with multiple emerging industries. So thank you to AgriFutures for their ongoing support, and to our speakers today, who are all respectively champions of not just their industries but the Australian agricultural sector in general. So look, that's enough from me. I think we're going to kick off today with lavender. We have Veronica Boret, who will be talking us through the industry. I suppose sort of housekeeping, as Olivia said, any questions, jot them down. We'll come to the Q&A session a little bit later on. And our speakers will just do a brief 5-minute sort of macro presentation, and then we can really unpack that all together during the Q&A time. So quick introduction. Veronica has over 30 years experience as a senior research and leadership roles specialising actually in national security. So we'll save those questions as well. Maybe we'll focus on Lavender for today. In 2015, she was appointed to the Scientific Advisory Board for the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Quite an acronym. She is the former director of BAI Scientific and held roles in management at the National Institute of Forensic Science, Bio-21 Molecular Science, and Biotech Institute of the University of Melbourne before commencing her role at La Trobe University as a Senior Director of La Trobe Institute for Sustainable Agriculture and Food. So what a privilege to have her here today to talk to us all on lavender. So can I please introduce Veronica?
Thanks very much, Al. Thanks for the introduction. And it really is a great pleasure to be here for the RD&E plan launch. I'd like to first thank the co-authors of the report, and that's from La Trobe Institute for Sustainable Ag and Food. So thanks to Professor Jim Whelan, who's currently at Zhejiang University, Laura Daniel, and Dr. Julio Mancuso Tridenta, who's also from the La Trobe Business School. And huge thanks to Talga and key members. And you know who you are that knocked on our door, basically, and with a proposition for the industry, which has ultimately culminated in this work. And also the lavender community, both within Talga and external to Talga, for extensive conversations, farm visits, invites to conferences, Talga board meetings, and long list that goes on. It's a fabulous community. And one thing's for certain is the commitment of the industry and their very clear view on the way forward. Very clear view on the way forward. So Talga represents 70% of the industry. 70% of growers and others in the value chain. And while they're clear on what the industry needs, they need support. And we'll come to that later. So why lavender? Lavender is an established crop that grows across Australia, across very diverse climates. There's a broad range of uses for lavender, and from cut flowers, oils, hydrosols, used in things like cosmetics and household cleaning products, to name a couple. And I'm sure everyone at some point has had some exposure to a lavender product. In terms of diversification, you can see how beautiful the mass plantings of lavender are in the picture on your screen. And many businesses diversify to tourism, with farm outlets and event spaces. And this can be a key income stream. And for some, it's a major income stream. So why support lavender? Well, firstly, there's very little data on lavender across the board. The most recent of RA's figures were from 2011 and 2012 financial year that showed that there was about a 1.3 million GDP. And given that there's no recent data, the approach that we took was to look at data from other countries on their imports and exports of lavender oils to provide a picture of the opportunity. So with that information, and we also had specific information of a unmet export demand of about 50 tonnes per annum of Australian lavender, with a value of about 10 million per annum, noting that it's extrapolated from GDP data from 11 to 12, 2011 to 2012, with assumptions on price and quality. But clearly there's, with the extensive analysis that we have done on the global market and the data on unmet export demand, it shows the potential for increased exports as well as import replacement. And again, taking into consideration issues such as quality, price and market preferences. But it does show an opportunity for the Australian market. So looking at the themes here in front of you, you'll find the detail in the report, but I just wanted to flag that lavender is generally viewed as a hardy plant, but there is very little information on farming systems, pointing to the need for extensive management by genetics, by agronomy research. And we assess that with a relatively modest investment would lead to good improvements for current growers, as well as information needed for new entrants to the market, or for farms that may want to diversify with lavender in their businesses. And this would also look at things such as the impacts of climate, such as waterlogging and drought, which agriculture across the country has had to contend with over recent years and into the future. So just on the next slide, some of the highlights that I just wanted to flag. As I mentioned before, we've highlighted the need for support for Talga. They've stressed the need for leadership support, including for the collection of data and the management of data. And this is critical for the industry, including support for the lab data database that was developed in another project, so that they can collect information for the industry, provide a repository for analysis of the global industry, and to make the research data available so that it can be stored and accessed through the lab data website. And on that point, while growers have done their own evaluations over the years, there have been few coordinated research studies on growing lavender, and we've assessed that coming from such a low base, a comprehensive agronomy study will produce significant gains in production and yield for the industry. And the last point is that we've had a very strong message from across the industry, both within and external, to Talga for truth in labelling. At present, substitutes or additives can be included in products and not identified, or nor their source revealed. So with leadership support to Talga, mentioned earlier, they could start the planning and approach to this, and as well as considering marketing plans and a whole lot of activities to implement the recommendations of the RD&E plan. So finally, lab data. This is the welcome page of the lab data website and database that's been developed for the lavender industry with Talga and with AgriFutures support. But it also may be a model for other industries to consider. So that's a quick snapshot of the Lavender RD&E plan, and I'd like to thank AgriFutures team, La Trobe University, Talga, and the lavender industry overall. So thank you very much.
Al, you're on mute.
Sorry, I've got a delay on my mute button. Sorry about that. You just missed nothing too special. Veronica, thank you for that. That was fantastic. And look, we will come back and delve deeper into some of those points. But look, fascinating industry, been around for thousands of years globally, a hugely lucrative industry, and what a great opportunity for somewhere like Australia, with its provenance and traceability, and an opportunity to kind of grow these sort of hardy crops for both import and export. So look forward to coming back to that one. Can I move across now to introduce you to Duncan Rowland? Duncan is an experienced CEO who's covered many sectors across commercial, government, research, adoption, non-for-profits. He's the Executive Officer of Stock Feed Manufacturers Council of Australia and the Chair of the Insect Protein Association of Australia, amongst many other talents. This is an incredible industry. This is one which I think when I was speaking to Duncan, everyone I come across in the innovation space is fascinated by the opportunities that this vertical presents, and it's still the opportunity across multiple verticals is incredible. And so Duncan's going to do a high level overview, and then we're going to delve in a little bit later. I know that we'll have a few questions to ask Duncan. So Duncan, let me pass over to you.
Thanks, Al. Much appreciated. Before I launch into it, I'd also like to thank a few organisations for their work, especially Tenacious Ventures, both Sarah and Ben. So thank you for developing up the report. I'd also like to thank my colleagues at the Insect Protein Association of Australia that sit on the board. I'd like to thank them for their input into it, and also the industry for undertaking the work that needed to be done get the R&D strategy up and running. But most importantly, also AgriFutures for leading us down this pathway. So thanks very much to Olivia and her team as well. If we could just move on, thank you. So I'm just going to give a quick overview. What's an insect? It's any invertebrate with wings, would you believe? It has 6 legs, body's divided up into 3 parts, and it's got 2 pairs of wings. So there's over 900,000 insects on this planet, and that we know of. And the breadth and industry availability for us to start delving into our production systems is just incredible. We produce feed for animals, we produce food for humans, and we produce fertilizers. And as the industry starts to grow, we're now starting to see other things start to come out into cosmetics, into electronics, but most importantly, we're also seeing the circularity of and reuse of waste, food waste, byproducts, co-products, those sorts of things going through the system. The process that we went through was quite a short process, but multi-stepped. It really was about making sure that we had broad consultation across the insect producers, researchers in this area, and our customers as well. There were 25 one-on-one semi-structured interviews that were undertaken, and they looked at key industry themes, the challenges that the industry is experiencing at the moment, and R&D priorities. There was a desktop research review that picked out the active and recent R&D projects globally. They were listed so that we didn't duplicate. And we also had an industry webinar, which was open to all industry, all interested parties, to make sure that we could get feedback on the draft document. That was held on the 13th of June. Subsequently, we then had a prioritisation survey, and that prioritisation survey was really about making sure that industry stakeholders had the ability to prioritise and the list of research that had been collected to date. And then we went into a review of the draft report and submission of the report to AgriFutures. So a couple of key issues that came out of that was investment. As I said earlier, this is a startup industry, and the industry really requires a lot of investment to get things rolling. Robotics, feeding trays, all those sorts of things that need to be brought in and started up. We need contracts from our users. Those users are the feed industry, the food industry, and fertilizer industry. Those contracts now are starting to flow in a small way, which gives the ability for the industry to start leveraging and getting an income for what they're supposed to be doing, and that is growing materials for food, and fertilizer. Regulation was seen as an industry issue, and albeit perceived at the moment, we've got some good regulations on board, and we just need to tweak those in a couple of the states that we're working with at the moment. Collaboration also is a big issue for the industry. Everyone, because of the investment, their IP is there and needs to be protected, but it doesn't stop us from collaborating. And so we need to really start working together in order to make sure that we have a a concerted effort and build the industry, and a common understanding, most importantly, across the board. Thanks. So RD&E priorities were broken down into 6 areas. Best practice guidelines, that providing the industry with credibility and ensuring quality and both feed safety and good manufacturing practices. Efficiencies and optimization for current systems is important as well. Strategies focused on identifying what insects and byproducts that we can utilise. We at the moment are focused on black soldier fly, mealworm and crickets, and there's obviously as I said earlier, 900,000 odd insects that we can draw down on. Obviously, we don't have access to all of those. We have to focus in on what's here in Australia and make sure that we can maximise what's there. Market development, consumer education and social licence is incredibly important for this industry to build and gain acknowledgement within other industry sectors. We've got to be able to enhance, strengthen and grow the industry's capacity and capabilities, and we have to also make sure that we communicate and extend the research that's being undertaken. So over the next couple of years, we're really focusing in on the Australian industry. Over the next 5 years, we've got to make the research broad in its applicability to industry, and we have to focus in on those issues that have been identified. What we don't want to do, though, is reinvent the wheel. Vitally important. And there's a lot of research being done internationally that we can draw down on. I think that's right to go. Al, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Duncan. That was a great overview there, and thank you for I think initially really breaking it down, because it is an emerging industry and one where it's fascinating, but still so much for the consumers to digest and understand. So what we might do now is open up to the floor. This is just an opportunity for us to ask questions via the chat with our 2 speakers today, and really it's sort of just an open plan. I can't see the questions popping up. If there aren't any there, I can certainly kick off. I'm not sure if it's my chat or not, Olivia.
No, I'd certainly encourage everybody online to start typing in your questions for our 2 speakers into the chat, and we will read those out. None have appeared just yet, but all yes, right. I can certainly start with some questions as well, Al.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, look, Olivia, why don't you jump in with the first one if you'd like there, and I've got a couple here I'd love to ask, but why don't I pass over to you to kick things off?
Okay, great. Thanks, Al. So my first question, Duncan, would be to you. How do you seeing this plan align with the recently launched and now active Emerging Insect Technology Hub?
I think this plays a vital role in providing information through to the Emerging Insect Technology Hub. We're actually waiting on our African counterparts to do exactly the same sort of research as Tenacious Ventures have done, and once they've been able to compile their priority list, we'll be bringing the 2 priority lists together and stepping forward and working out where we're going to head with the work for the hub.
Thanks, Duncan. And perhaps it's worth just giving a very brief overview of what the EAT Hub is for those online that may not be familiar with that.
Yeah, so the Emerging Industry Technology Hub is funded by AgriFutures and ACR, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. It is comprised of myself as the independent chair. We have a secretariat coming from Kenya, in Nairobi based, through ISIPI, and for the life of me, I can't remember what ISIPI stands for, so I do apologise for that. So it's ICIPE, and we have two representatives from Australia and two from Africa, East Africa as well. Three of those are commercial insect producers, and one is a researcher. So looking at basically a collaboration between the two countries.
Thanks, Duncan, for that overview. We've got some questions coming through now. So did we want to launch into those, Al?
Yeah, I'm going to jump into Emily's question and come back to Lara's. So this is to Veronica. Emily asked, hi, Veronica, where would I start if interested in joining the lavender industry, for example, to make sure my property is suitable and to access the lavender market? Well, Veronica, you're back on mute there. You're following my lead.
There was, yeah. Sure. I think I was having the same problem as you, Al. It was a bit of a delay there, but yeah, look, good question. And I would go straight to Talga, and you'll find their website if you look up TALGA, the Australian Lavender Growers Association. The president, I see Louise Bickerton has made a comment there, and they certainly can provide a lot of support, and also Clive Larkman, who's online, who's a major supplier of plants for the industry.
Fantastic. And I suppose if we'll just go to Louise's questions, because I think that flows into Talga. How does the lavender industry in Talga find avenues to fund future activities when the grower base consists mainly of smaller local boutique growers, large growers, many of whom do not communicate with Talga? So it's probably an extension of what you were just saying there, Veronica.
So I didn't catch everything you said. It broke up a little bit, but I think yeah. What you were saying was, what do small growers do who aren't part of Talga? Is that correct?
Yeah, it was, yes. So what avenues to fund future activities when the grower base is mainly smaller boutique growers and versus larger industries with larger growers?
Yeah, so I think that's a good point in terms of what is the industry going to do to reach out for support at the moment. AgriFutures is probably the best place to be looking for support into in the short term, while it is consisting of the type of small farms and structures that it is, as well as some very large farms. And I think in the report it sort of points to where those priorities should be, and if I think too, with Talga, if they get some support to look at where the funding opportunities are and put together, I guess a list of opportunities for them. But I would think AgriFutures would be the top of the list at the moment.
Yeah, and I know that the AgriFutures are working around industry development frameworks and the like that are really focused on helping map out the commercialisation and attraction of the Australian emerging industry. So, that watch that space. That'll be something which will very much complement these RD&E plans. I'm going to jump back to Lara's question. Lara, who we'll be hearing from after this, who's asking Duncan around what the main market is for insect, human, pet, livestock, feed, etc. Duncan, could you elaborate on the 3 Fs and the opportunity there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So really our major market at the moment is in livestock feed. So looking at aqua feed as well as poultry, closely followed, if not equal, with pet food. So there's a huge requirement there, and a big push with new and emerging companies starting up in the pet food area. Human food is a little bit behind in throughput, but because of its because of the requirements that are need to be met through the Food Safety Australia New Zealand FSANZ model. So yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing that livestock feed industry growing, as well as the human side of things as well.
And on that note, Duncan, I've got a question here around what has been the main obstacle for insect protein acceptance as feedstock use in Australia?
Look, I think it's about feed safety. You know, we're as an industry, we're talking up the fact that we are a circular economy, or working through that circular economy presentation, and with that comes a mindset from the end users wanting to know about, you know, the contamination of feed and insect meal, etc. So what we've done as an industry is said, let's pick up FeedSafe. FeedSafe is a quality assurance program that's used by stock feed manufacturers. It is based on HACCP, the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points, and GMP, which is good manufacturing practice. And so by bringing that together, the marketplace is now saying, well, if you've got FeedSafe, that's a great thing. We'll start to utilise that.
So has it got over that approval phase now? Right now, is it in that post-approval, or is it still going through the last sort of certification process?
No, look, and you're talking about FeedSafe, or talking about the market in general? No, FeedSafe, we've got 3-4 companies that are on board, that are as provisional members of Stock Feed Manufacturers Council, and implementing FeedSafe. We've got one that is fully certified at the moment.
It's fantastic, because, you know, it's also an ongoing debate, you know, food versus fuel, food versus animal feed. You know, we've seen some pretty sizable climatic events happening, and large exporters banning certain exports of products, and we've seen a whole host of supporting narratives around food security and sustainability, and putting further pressure on, you know, the growing of crops for livestock feed, you know, aquaculture, as well as, you know, things like biofuels. So it's certainly, you know, very much topical, and, you know, a necessity, really.
Absolutely, Al. I mean, you start looking at the protein meals that are being used within the animal feed industry. Fish meal, all companies are moving away from the use of fish meal. The cost of it is prohibitive. Sustainability wise, it's got a very short lifespan. You know, we import at the moment about 55,000 tonnes of soybean meal into Australia. That's a shipload, SHIP, every fortnight, and you know, we need to substitute that out for homegrown protein meals. So we've got a huge number of opportunities there that this industry can jump into.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fascinating, and thank you for that clarification. I was going to jump on the buzzer to beep out the words there, but it was actually ship. Back to Veronica. One quick question. We need to then get back to Talga. The uses of lavender, a lot of things in cosmetics, a lot of uses in health and wellness, which is a huge topic, that's sort of compounding year on year. You saw L'Oreal purchase ESOP for 3.7 billion. There's some huge amounts going on in this health, wellness, beauty sort of space. What is the future, the roadmap for lavender? You've got these big growth profile industries, you've got ecotourism, you've got a whole host of things. What does that look like, Veronica, in terms of the opportunities and the growth paths domestically and abroad?
So the feedback from the industry has been that there is a big opportunity in terms of both lavender oils and hydrosols used in a range of products, but particularly future in, and it's already used in foods and honeys, and there's also a push into the nutraceuticals market, which is what you're referring to, and some of the people that we spoke to around that particular part of it were quite keen to see efficacy studies to support the use of lavender in a range of nutraceuticals, aromatherapies, and that sort of thing. So we included that in the plan, but it's probably a little bit further down the track. Getting funding for that, there'd have to be a more extensive analysis of what funding bodies would support that into the future. The other sort of related to that is the truth in labelling. So what is actually in a product that you're buying as a lavender product, either lavender flavoured or includes lavender, and that was a topic that got a lot of airplay, and certainly the view is, and we feel that lavender's not alone in that, and there are a lot of other industries that where the label doesn't need to say that it's an inferior quality, it's adulterated, there's a substitutes, and it's not the lavender that you think you're buying. So the suggestion is to really engage with some of those other industries, and across the essential oils industry is the obvious first place to engage, and to look at some of the issues around the labelling, and then that flowing on to some of the issues around claims and efficacy.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes on to that kind of that original sort of overarching focus around the origination of products, and it's one of the core IPs that Australia have is our provenance and traceability, our ethical sourcing, our opportunity to to provide products that we can truly trace back to source and show that source of truth. So and there was a question from one of the guests around that provenance traceability side. I'll ask another question here. Will the ICIPE, so this is going back over to the insect industry, will the ICIP be coordinating a similar R&D plan for Africa, specific countries? Is it a different scope altogether? So I suppose, how does that partnership look like? And why that strategic partnership? I guess why the partnership with Kenyan-based operation?
Look, ICIPE is a world leader in insect research, and we thought that it was a beneficial arrangement to partner with them and build a relationship more strongly with them. The R&D plan they are developing will be across Africa, and making sure that we then start to build the R&D plan between the two organisations, or two countries, I should say.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, what a fantastic partnership, and working relationship to have, especially in an industry with a global application in the protein space. But we've got time probably for a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on to our guest speaker. We've got I'm just going to sort of look in here what we have here. Duncan, I'm going to say we've
Al, we're really bad reception from you. Perhaps I'll just take over for a minute reading the questions.
Yeah.
Duncan, this is another question for you. So it talks to, in Australia, we are behind other countries in their insect industry development. How do we foresee we catch up and differentiate the Australian insect product?
Look, that's a great question, because at the end of the day, we need to start utilising what's being done overseas, and incorporating it into our industry, so that we start to catch up. You know, we're probably 10 years, 12 years behind what's happening in the EU, and as well as in North America. So we really need to jump ahead, and the only way we can do that is by working to utilise the information that they've already collected and working on.
Thanks, Duncan. Veronica, we've now got another question for you. So you mentioned earlier that Talga represents 70% of lavender growers. The question is around, does this represent the majority of production? That is, are the non-members of Talga smaller producers, or are we actually aware of those non-members?
So the members of Talga, represent some of the very big producers right through to many of the small producers and small farms. And likewise, outside of Talga, there are some major well-known producers and a number of smaller ones as well. So for the purpose of the plan and to collect information, we spoke to people inside and outside of Talga, and that was really important, including farm visits to farms that aren't part of Talga. In terms of that figure would be the number of growers rather than the production volume, because there just isn't the data on how much is produced. But certainly there's some very big farms outside and a lot of very big farms inside.
Great, thanks, Veronica. Another question for Veronica. Al's joined us as well, so maybe one question left each. I'm going to select one here because there's a couple of ticks. So, are the results of the Lavender RD&E plan indicative of opportunities of growth of other essential oils production in Australia? Veronica, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but perhaps have a stab.
I'm sure there are people online that could answer it much better than I could, but certainly, we did look at some of the stuff from the broader essential oils community, some of the stuff that's been published, and I would think that some of the recommendations from that would apply or could apply or could be utilised by the other parts of the essential oils industry. And certainly the lab data database might be something that other parts of the industry would could benefit from, and it could be very easily geared towards other parts of the industry.
Great, thanks, Veronica. Perhaps one last question for Duncan, and then I'll hand back over to you, Al. Here's one. So this is an important one, perhaps to give context to why we've developed a plan, Duncan, 3 years into the previous plan. So the 2020 RD&E plan was obsolete after 3 years. Is the industry still moving and changing so quickly that this new RD&E plan will not last through until 2028?
I hope so. I hope in 2, maybe 3 years we'll be having to do it all again, because the industry has grown and changed so much that we've developed to the next level, and that's really what the goal of what we're trying to achieve is growth within the industry. Get it to a point where we might be a levied industry, and make sure that we can continue on the good R&D and extension that's required to maintain a thriving industry.
Thanks, Duncan. I think that points to both our emerging industries, doesn't it? And that we do want to see growth in these emerging industries. And certainly we'd love to see more investors come and invest in these incredible industries that show a lot of promise. But at that point, Al, hopefully we've got better reception at your end now. I'll hand back to you. You're on mute. Still on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me, or is it frozen?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. It's part of the tax you pay for being regional. So I won't hang around too long. I'm going to jump straight in and introduce our guest speaker today. She's a freelance author, keynote speaker, industry champion, and car enthusiast. Lara Wild is a CEO of Far North Queensland Food Incubator, strategic advisor to Sustainable Table, a project that aims to facilitate the transition of regen ag to the Atherton tablelands. She's a huge advocate of Australian agriculture, and I would love to welcome her to the AgriFutures event to talk FNQ, food, and much more. So can we all please welcome Lara?
I think I'm having the same mute problem there, Al. Thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you to Olivia and the team at AgriFutures for inviting me along today. I'm actually calling in from Marmoo country, which is up on the Palmerston River in far north Queensland today. And it seems very cold for us in the tropics at the moment, but a beautiful part of the world if anyone's been up here. Just quickly, I run the FNQ Food Incubator based out of Cairns. We have 4 entities that we work with that are, just to give you a little bit of scope of who we are and where we're coming from. So the FNQ Food Incubator was started because we saw a lot of opportunity for people to share their community, their culture, their passions through food, but value adding and manufacturing food is not a beginner's game. It's all very well to make some tomato sauce at home and you don't kill any of your immediate family members and your friends think it's fantastic, but to actually turn that into a business, to take it from a side hustle to your main income is a big challenge. We work a lot with farmers who have underutilized crop. We've stopped saying waste crop, we've started saying underutilized. And we also work a lot with people who just, it's their passion. So they might be migrants, they might be Indigenous, they might just be a mad keen home chef who wants to share their love of a particular recipe. Food has such a huge meaning to so many people, and it's the one thing that we can all unite on. Every single person on the planet eats. Kirsty, go back. Yeah, you're way too fast for me there. but yeah, so that's where we started the FNQ Food Incubator. The Food Manufacturing Hub is our commercial kitchen facility that we have set up, and I'll take you through that a little bit later on. But let's say you are the world's best tomato farmer. Your priority is farming tomatoes. And if you have too many tomatoes, going into the tomato sauce business can be challenging. There's a lot of food science, a lot of food tech that goes into that. So we hold their hand. We do a lot of collaborations with, say, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries to use their food scientists and their food techs to be able to assist people. And we make sure that the product that's going out to the shelf at the end of the day is not only shelf stable, but it's also delicious and it's profitable. There's no point paying to feed people unless you want a really expensive hobby. We have a 4th entity. We do walk the walk. We have Fang's chili sauce, which is how we began. We learned a lot of lessons in taking Fang's chili sauce from a passionate home-based chili sauce through to Asian shelves and exporting very successfully. So we have been through the ringer ourselves, and we've learned a lot of hard lessons along the way. Our 4th and final entity is our not-for-profit arm, and that's the Food Beverage Institute, which focuses on the development of the Indigenous food industry, something we're very passionate about. And one of my bugbears in life is that if I think Italy, I can think pasta. If I think America, I end up thinking barbecue for some reason. If I think France, then I can think of all those beautiful, rich, creamy dishes. If I think Asia, I think noodles. If I think Australian food, We think lamingtons and meat pies and pavlova and pretty much the blandest things to come out of Europe. And that frustrates me. I think that Australia, we grow so many amazing foods and we have such a diverse culture, but we're not united yet with the cuisine. And so we have this passion for empowering Indigenous people to be able to share their foods, but also to become economically sustainable and independent by creating those business opportunities. So that's who we are in a nutshell. Kirsty, next slide, please. Today, we're talking about how we can be innovative on the farm and we can create new income streams. Now, traditionally, farming is about growing a crop or raising livestock and selling that on. Now, Kirsty, next one, please. The traditional way we saw it was, I've grown a pineapple and here is a pineapple for sale. That has been the basis of farming and farming income since anyone can remember. And it's fantastic that that still continues. It's a very, very lucrative business if you can get it right. Our next slide, though, is the other way that that's gone traditionally, and that is where instead of selling direct to the consumer, we're selling to another business. We're selling to a cafe, a restaurant, a caterer, and they're taking that whole fresh produce, which is lovely and perfect, and they're turning it into salads and other dishes. Again, nothing wrong with that market. We all know it. If you're in farming, I'm sure you've experienced it. The problem we have, though, with these two markets, next slide, please, is the waste. And this is a huge issue that everyone in the world is looking at the moment. We're talking about 30% of all crops produced are either left on the vine, left on the tree, left in the paddock and ploughed back in, or they're fed to livestock purely because no one wants to buy them because they might have a slight blemish. They might be too large. They might be too small. They might just have not hit the right market and therefore the pricing's out and it costs more to pick it than you can sell it. Bananas are one of the scariest things. And I was talking recently to a group and they said, well, why don't you just get chickens? To put it in perspective, one of my banana farmers that I work with, he's throwing out 50 tons a day, 50 tons a day. And that's just one farm. We have a lot of banana farms in far north Queensland and throughout Australia. And the reason these bananas are thrown out is ludicrous. So, for example, Woolworths will like you to have a hand of bananas that has 3 bananas and 2 bananas. That's their preferred configuration. If one of those bananas has a slight blemish and you take it off the configuration, you've got to throw all 5 out. Absolutely nothing wrong with the other 4 bananas except that they were attached to one with a blemish. And so you end up seeing piles like this. The other challenge we have with fruits like banana is a green banana is not exciting for anybody. It's hard, it's flavourless, and the sugar content's all wrong. So you need then a ripening shed, or again, you're feeding it out. Or we're looking at products like Watkins have done with Evolution Foods, where they've actually turned it into a green banana flour. So it's about getting innovative and thinking outside the box. 30% of that produce that we have in Australia is left in the paddock or it's fed back to livestock or ploughed in because we don't have a market at the moment. And one of my passions in life, my OCD, wants to turn that around. So we do a lot of work working very closely with farmers. We work with the FNQ growers, the Queensland Fruit and Vegetable Growers / GrowCom, around how can we team up with those farmers to start reducing that waste. This lady here is by the name of Jess Ulig. She's based out of Port Douglas and she has Green Food Australia. She gets even more excited about reducing waste than I do. So she goes out onto farm and she looks at how we can compost it. Now, I'd love to tell you the details of exactly what she does, but I'm not really a details person. She has this magical fairy dust. So she digs a big pit, she puts all of your waste in, she sprinkles the dust on, she covers it up with a tarp, and you end up with a very rich fertilizer at the other end of that. So then people can either sell that as a liquid fertilizer or they can use it as a humy soil to plough back in and enrich the soil that they're farming with. This is obviously is not the only option that we have. There's a lot of people doing this sort of product. But we need to start thinking compost is more than I just ploughed in some green bananas to how do I actually value add to that compost to create another income stream where I can either sell the compost, I can sell the liquid fertilizer, but then there's other options where people are looking at gases and fuels that they can generate off their waste that they're starting to compost in the paddock. My next slide, and this one's just for Duncan. So We have some, I'm very, very excited by the insect industry. One of our local businesses, this is Bugs Alive. They have crickets, black soldier flies, and woodies. Now, we did a really interesting run with Sterling, who has Bugs Alive, around crickets, roasting them and then grinding it up and putting it into breads and pizza bases to create a high protein bread or pizza base or pasta. One of the interesting things we're doing in that space is then around the allergies. So I understand if you have a nut allergy, you can't eat crickets. How many people do we make sick before we figure this out? And doing some of that research. What we're finding, though, with our insect farmers in our region is we want to be able to take the crickets and use them for human food. Let's start developing that as a value add, as an alternative protein source. One of the challenges we have, though, is he has such a huge demand for livestock and pet food that he doesn't have any left over to feed people. So we're really working strategically with our local insect farmers. Mackay's bananas up here, they are also using black soldier flies as a way of breaking down their compost quicker and creating another income stream. It's also worth noting, I haven't gone into detail in this presentation in the fields of algae and bacteria as an alternative protein, and yeasts and culture lab-grown meats, because to me, they're not a value add to a product that I had, but they're a very interesting field that's starting to emerge. And I, for one, get very, very excited about algae. Algae has so much potential, and it's not just in food. If we start talking fish food and livestock and so on, it's great, but also when we start talking about fuels and different oils that can be extracted. The next option that we have when we start talking about additional farm incomes is putting in a cafe, your roastery, your open cellar door, your farm gate produce, having people come as a part of their visit and experiencing your brand. This is the Skybury Cafe and Roastery up on the Atherton Tablelands. Beautiful spot. Does this cafe stand up commercially by itself? Not yet, but it's a great opportunity for them to create that brand loyalty that they're looking for then people to take their coffee and their papayas and so on home. If anyone's interested, Skybury is the oldest coffee plantation in Australia and also grows 60% of the red papaya in Australia. So they're the largest papaya growers in our country anyhow. So very interesting what they've done of tacking this on. Only open weekdays. So you'd think if it was a true tourism business, they'd be looking at weekends, but they have decided that work-life balance is more important. Agri-tourism is a huge opportunity for us, though, to not only create another income stream and get innovative, but to also start looking at how we can build that brand around our product. So this is Shaylee Strawberry Farm. They have you pick your own strawberry adventure, so you can take the kids there. Of course, you got to manage this with your biosecurity if you're looking at doing it on your farm. But they also have the cafe. They also have all the value add products. And so they start creating a multi-leg stool for them to stand on. Agri-tourism has a lot of support also from government. And as we lead up to the 2032 Olympics, I know a lot of people are looking at a marketing strategy which allows them to put fresh produce in, take home shelf stable product, but also come and experience this on farm. Rainforest Bounty is near Lavender, again in Mamu country, and they have a native ingredient orchard. So they're very much in lily pillies and Davidson plum, and they're doing a lot of value add products in that space. What they're finding though, and you will if you have any sort of exotic one-off kind of fruits that people aren't familiar with, is educating them about your product. They built this outdoor kitchen area right by a beautiful creek. And so they developed their own cooking classes and function center so that people could come along and learn about it. Davidson plum, not a fun fruit to eat if you just pick it off a tree and chew into it. It's quite tart, but then people get to learn how to use that fruit, not only in the traditional ways. Samantha Martin, our bush tucker woman, she's an Aboriginal chef. She does some fantastic workshops there, but they also look at how you can use it. We have a Indigenous business that comes into our facility and makes a Davidson plum paste similar to a quince paste. So how can you start incorporating it in your menu on a regular basis? If you happen to have mastered something and you are trained in it and you understand it better than anyone else, don't miss the opportunity to teach others and make an income stream off that. So plenty of field days and workshops. And again, you have to manage your biosecurity, but it's a great opportunity to be seen as a thought leader in your particular field and create that innovation and that leadership there so that you can have another income stream as well. It's amazing the opportunities that come through when you start opening the gate and letting other people in. Now, one of the exciting things, we partner with a lot of universities and we like seeing what's happening in the research and development. I get very, very excited by this space. Skybury that we talked about earlier, they have their own tissue culture and they do a lot of R&D in that. If you have go back one, Kirsty. If you have new practices that you're trialing, if you have new strains that you're trialing, and you can start partnering with a university or an industry group like AgriFutures to start putting that on paper and sharing it with the world, you can actually create another income stream there. One of the ways that I love playing in this space is definitely with our Indigenous foods. There's so much in the tropics. 40% of the population currently lives near the equator. And we're talking about by 2030, that's going to be more than 50% of the population and some of the most affluent people in the world. But if we start looking at farming in the tropics, then we're looking at huge deforestation, which will obviously lead to massive climate issues. So how do we start doing the research and development, particularly in the tropics, of what farming can take place, but also what crops are endemic to the area, and then what are the opportunities? There's a fruit called black sapote, which tastes like chocolate pudding. It has a very close relative that tastes like peanut butter. Now, what are my opportunities if I have a peanut allergy to develop a satay out of a peanut butter fruit that's then safe for everybody to eat? We are looking at teaming up right now with Yasmina and the team from Coffee at the University of Queensland and the Food and Beverage Accelerator to start looking at what are our native ingredients, what are our Indigenous foods, what are their traditional uses, but then how can we turn that into a shelf-stable product to really push our brand as an Australian cuisine overseas as well. This slide here about seeds and tissue culture, don't forget, if you've mastered growing the perfect papaya or the perfect mango or the perfect chili, you can not only sell the fruit, but you can also sell the plant that goes with it. We have one client who makes a chili sauce with us. He grows 600 different varieties of chili. 80% of his business is just about selling those chilies, the chili seeds, sorry, on to people who are super passionate about causing themselves pain with a chili at home. Did you know that there's actually a club? It's like a 1% motorcycle club with its own 3-piece patch on a vest for people who eat really extreme chilies. Toxic masculinity went a step too far in the chili world, in my world. So just think outside the square. If you're working with lavender and you have a strain that no one else has seen, here's your opportunity to not only sell the lavender, but sell the IP and the plant behind it. If you've got an inner geek, make sure you can let the way out. There's always an easier and simpler way of doing something. A lot of people are developing software at the moment, and I think there was a politician not so long ago who boasted about his ability to check troughs and turn waters on and off from his phone in Parliament. There's lots and lots of opportunity here, not only to develop that software and the brand, but also to compile information. So, for example, I was asking Duncan earlier about what are my allergies with insects, and did different insects have different allergies? Who's going to create a database of that and then charge me to access it or to be able to test and to get into that space? So there's the software, there's the apps, but there's also just being the holder of that information for your particular commodity. This striking young man is Andrew Bates. I actually went to boarding school with Andrew once upon a time. He has Swarm Farm Robotics. So he went one step further than the inner geek who wrote the software and actually got the welder out and started looking at robotics and his farming out near Emerald. But this is a huge field and we have yet to scratch the surface. So if you're sitting on your farm thinking there's got to be an easier way to do this, there's got to be a more efficient way, a more cost-effective way, then yeah, get into robotics. I'm sure there is something out there. There's some really, really exciting technology coming out. And in a former life, I worked with the Australian Agricultural Colleges, and we used to talk to school kids about careers in agriculture. And they're like, oh yeah, we've got some students that aren't quite smart enough to go to university, so we'll plunk them out there chasing cows somewhere. And then when you start talking to the students about some of the things that are happening in robotics and technology and the ability for them to spot one weed in a whole paddock of plants and spray just that one weed, or what we're doing with drones. Drones are fascinating. Huge opportunities for us to create specific robotics and technology to be able to meet the demands of different commodities and different environments, particularly when we start getting remote. One more option that we have if we're looking to create another income stream is to get your own retail outlet. Johnson's Farm Markets in Cairns is a huge one, but there's lots around the country. If you don't feel you're brave enough to commit all by yourself as one farm, and I've seen Lavender people do this really well just outside of Toowoomba and Stanthorpe, but get yourself a little bit of co-op going and get some other farmers on board. This is a great opportunity to directly connect with your consumer. You can get that direct consumer feedback. You can also create a brand. So Johnson's Farm Markets, they actually grow avocados and potatoes primarily, but they've teamed up with all the other farmers in the region to be able to showcase their honeys and their sauces and everything else that comes out. This lady here in the very attractive hairnet and gloves is one of my bosses, Mary James. So Mick and Mary own the FNQ Food Incubator and the Food Manufacturing Hub. This is what our commercial kitchen looks like. We can't bake a cupcake. We can't deep fry a chip. We're very useless at sandwiches. What we can do is we can turn out 1,200 litres of sauce, relish, chutney, wet condiments in one batch. We can hold 4,400 litres until we're ready to put it in a bottle, and then we can put 2,500 bottles filled every hour. We specialise in that space, and not a lot of people do. What we find is that within the commercial cooking space, people think MasterChef, they think restaurant, and that's fantastic. But if you're trying to make 10,000 units of chili sauce, those kitchens are not going to do it for you. So when we have people come into our kitchens who want to value add, and they might be a full-time farmer, they might be a full-time accountant who just has a mad passion for Worcestershire sauce, we can help them every step of the way. It is a very unique facility in that we don't have any minimum order. If you go to a similar facility in Melbourne, say, you will not only have a minimum order of 100,000 units, but you will also not be allowed in the kitchen. And as I said before, food is such a personal passion that when people come in and say, this is grandma's tomato chutney, no one else can touch it, and I must make sure it's perfect, we can bring them into the kitchen with us so they can be there every step of the way. This also allows us to run some really good training programs for young people. We bring a lot of schools through for workshops, but we also bring a lot of Indigenous trainees through. So that kitchen has a lot of specialist equipment. Kirsty, can I go back a slide, please? I always compare this kitchen to being like a gym. The idea of a gym is that it's not that you can't do a sit-up at home. The idea is that if you go into a gym, they will have all of this equipment that you've either never tried or you can't afford by yourself, or you're not sure if it's going to work for you. They also have personal trainers who have done what you want to do, and they can teach you the best way of doing it. And they also have a community of people who will band around you and support you. We're very much like that for food manufacturing. So the things that Mick and Mary know about how to make sauce and jams and chutneys is mind-boggling. Plus, we have our Department of Ag's food scientists. We have three of them now, three on hand whenever we need. And they will do things like, well, if you just add a little bit of lemon juice, be able to maintain the colour for longer, you'll get better shelf life. It'll taste better, etc. They'll also have a huge network of people to talk about bottling, packaging, labelling, some of the lessons to learn. We had one client who ordered 100,000 pre-printed bottles out of China. Very, very cost effective, fantastic. They did a run of 10,000 bottles, and then the government changed the regulations and their labels had to change. And so the other 90,000 bottles, they still had to pay to put another label on. So just little lessons that you can pick up from being in that community and being showcased and connected to what else is happening. So some of the products that we work with, obviously we work very closely with our local farmers, Shaylee Strawberry Farm and Skyberry that we turned around before. We received a grant a couple of years ago from Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water to assist farmers to do a proof of concept. So Skyberry's papaya jam, that was one of the products that we put through that. Now, when you think about developing a food product, if you go to the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and you say, I want to take my whole fresh papaya and turn it into a jam here, and I want it to be shelf stable of at least 12 months. And I want to be able to know what the recipe is to make 10,000 units, because I can't cook. And I was astounded that if I took 1 litre of sauce and multiplied all my ingredients by 1,000, I wouldn't get 1,000 litres that taste the same. So it's all about, how do we commercially scale that recipe? How do we make sure it's cost effective? Again, working in that Indigenous food space, do I have a regular supply chain of this? So we have one client who makes a beautiful green ant chili sauce. I'll never be able to sell it to Woolworths because I can't guarantee you where I'll get green ants next week and the week after. So making sure that it's commercially viable as a recipe. So we do a lot of work, but if you were to go to, say, Department of Ag and say, all right, I've got 2 tonnes of papaya a day, how do I make jam? For them to do the shelf life testing, the recipe development, to go through all of that, the sensory testing, get feedback from consumers, you're looking at a budget of 70 to 100,000 before you start manufacturing. So that's where it's really important to be in that community where you can tap in and say, well, what did you do and how can I learn from that and team up as much as possible? So we do a lot of work in shelf stable and food beverages, like I said, the wet condiments, but we've also done iced tea, ginger beer, kombucha. Remember the big kombucha craze? Everybody was suddenly grabbing cabbages and getting very excited. We've also done popcorn, granolas, protein powders, sesame snaps. The thing at the moment seems to be vegan, plant-based protein, like balls and peanut butter cups and things. So lots of experimentation, a lot of innovation, and a lot of opportunity for people to embrace different cultures as well. A lot of Asia coming through at the moment. The next option, see, I did put some lavender in here for you, Veronica. So we do a lot of work with people also who are looking at cosmetics. So we've got people with deodorants, lip balms, facial oils, hair treatments, material dyes like clothing dyes. We've got something really, really simple that everyone seems to be checking out is coffee-based scrubs for your face. There's a long line of cosmetics and fun products that you can make using those excess products that you might have. One that we get asked a lot about, particularly in the world of Indigenous, is around the pharmaceuticals and medicinals. I avoid these like the plague because there's just too much red tape for us to play with, but it is a huge industry. If you're brave enough and you've got the courage to take it on, definitely look into it. But I would strongly suggest partnering with someone who specializes in this area. We had one client. We do a lot of testing on the products that come in, and we had one client who brought in this wonderful tonic, and we sent it off to the government labs to be tested, and then they called the police because some of the ingredients weren't quite proper. And so I have learned that I just don't play with anyone who tells me they're going to cure obesity, premature balding, or cancer. Those are a whole special field, but it's out there. So if you would like to know who to partner with, just let me know and I can send you their number. One of the other exciting fields that we've got coming through, next slide please, is looking at fibres. The leather on the left there is made from pineapple leaves. We have got a lot happening in this place. Everyone's heard of hemp fibres, of course, but we've got an avocado leather coming through out of the skins at the moment, and avocado desperately needs something to value add. They've got a lot of excess avocados at the moment. One of the exciting projects we're working with in Far North Queensland is some technology around how to take banana trees. Once a banana tree has had a bunch of bananas, that particular trunk is then chopped out and put into waste. We're working with Tom at the moment around how do we turn that into a paper and, more importantly, a construction type board. So he's made obviously lots of papers and business cards and different cardboards and so on out of it, but he can also make a board, a big piece that looks like timber, but it's not at all flammable. So you've suddenly got a fireproof building material to start building houses or furniture or shelving from. So there's some of the really cool innovations that are coming out. And again, it's not just the fruit that we're talking about as a waste, but it's also all of the bits that go around it. So what do we do with the trees? What do we do with the tops of the pineapple and so on? So very exciting to look at what's happening in that fibre space. One of the big markets that we have coming up is the vegan market, and it's not just for the really hardcore vegans, and it is a special kind of cult. The vegans who won't have honey because it put labor on the bees, and then they won't eat a fruit that comes from a plant that was pollinated by bees. Those people make life much harder than I need it to be. But we do see, not only in the vegan market, but there's a lot of people who are choosing a healthier diet or a more environmentally conscious diet, and they're going more plant-based. And that's a big trend that we're seeing. The sneakers there are made from the pineapple leather, again, that we saw a moment ago. But this delicious looking burger is it's sold as a pulled pork burger, but the pig is actually replaced with jackfruit. And again, one of those tropical fruits that we're doing a lot of research into. What are the other uses? It's not just about eating it as a whole fruit, although that is pretty exciting, having it as a whole fruit, but we're actually turning it into a meat alternative, which, yeah, this is great stuff. And again, we're starting to look not only at the environmental impact, but the health impact. Cleaners and industrial applications. Now, Duncan was talking earlier about how we're starting to turn insects into fertilizer, but we've also got a lot of people taking the essential oils like your lavenders and so on. They're also value adding with your citrus and your eucalypts and all of your tropical or native ingredients, and looking at how we can take those and we can start applying them to other applications, not just food and fiber. So cleaners and industrial applications is a big field that we're starting to play in. I love the idea that it's not just a whole line of numbers and things I can't pronounce, but we're actually starting to get everyday products happening that are responsibly produced and are good for you. So there's some of the ways that we're working, not only with farmers, but with passionate foodies, to start looking at how do we get innovative on farm? How do we value add? How do we create new income streams? I think the big thing for me when we start talking about this opportunity is when we talk about, from a farm point of view, what is your business plan? It's not just about having that fresh fruit, particularly if it's seasonal, but this is an opportunity for you to build a brand outside of just that flush season. So if I take Skyberry, for instance, Skyberry has its fresh fruit, it has its cafe and roastery, it has what it's doing in the field of R&D into the growing of papaya. They do a lot of educational tours, but then let's say I'm in Melbourne and I haven't got access to their fresh fruit that week. I can still have a jar of their jam on my breakfast table. So I've still got the brand front of mind. I can still have some of their lip balm sitting in my travel bag. I have all of these other options. So from a business planning point of view, it's very good to be able to have multiple platforms that you're reaching out to your customers and you're letting them know about. One of the big cautions, though, that I have is if you're going down this path, make sure you invest the time to protect your brand and to protect your IP. If you are doing this research and development, if you are paying for the latest chili sauce recipe that's going to rock the world, make sure you've protected it and make sure you have it documented and it's all yours. I have some people with organic bananas and they make the world's best ice cream. Fantastic. And they wanted to start developing that and commercially scaling it. When we dug to the bottom of it, they just have organic bananas, which they've sold to an ice cream maker, and the ice cream maker has the IP and owns that recipe. So making sure that you really do own your recipe or you do own your IP so that you can then take it to the next level if that's the place you want to go with it. I know Department of Ag's done a lot of this with their research and development into different strains of, say, mangoes, and it's created an income opportunity for that industry. Whatever you try to do, though, I am huge on collaboration. Don't try to go it alone. If you want to start looking at an industrial application for lavender, team up with Talga. If you want to start looking at the latest, you know, everyone's done black soldier fly. That's old hat. I want to start looking at rhinoceros beetle. Fantastic. Team up with Duncan and the guys and make sure that you're getting all the help you can. If you want to do an agri-tourism venture on your farm, fantastic. Team up with a local tour guide and get them to do some of the legwork for you. Don't try and do it all. If your main core business is farming, keep it that way and then collaborate where you can. If you really want to do research into whether or not peanut butterfruit can replace peanuts in satay, great. Team up with a university or a commodity group who can help you do that. Don't try and take it all on your own. And of course, if you want to develop any sort of shelf-stable jam, sauce, chutney, please give me a call. I'm happy to help. but also happy to point you in the right direction if we're not your people.
Lara, that was absolutely fantastic. If you're not jumping up and down, I don't know what is wrong with you. That was so insightful, and what I think is, well, you know, that resonates so much, not the breadth of what you covered, but how you framed each one with revenue, commerciability, viability, profitability. You know, I know I've put my, investment funds management hat on, but it's so imperative that things are looked at. How do you commercialize these things? It's great to have a hobby or a passion, but as Lara said, unless you want to pay for somebody to eat your food, you need to work out the viability of it. And as we're working with emerging industries, so much of it is around how do you attract partners, collaborators, investors, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, it has to have some form of commerciability for you to scale and build it. And having that lens over it is just fantastic. And I thought that was just fascinating that so much could come from one food bowl of the country. And if you extrapolate that across all of our food bowls, I mean, wow, what an opportunity we have here in Australia, and both domestically, but also on the export market. We're a country that have exported so many of our natural resources, both hard and soft commodities, talent, technology, startups, and then we brought them back in at a premium. And with this sort of day and age, with the reshoring and the opportunity to really be focused on domestic product, I don't believe there's ever been such an opportune time. So, I mean, look, where to start? I don't know where to start on that. That was just incredible. Shall we? I've got some questions popping up, which helps it out because I have so many that I want to unpack. But look, here we go. Great insights. There's everyone sort of, thanking you for that overview. Look, I guess do we want to kind of touch on? There is so much there. The first steps, the collaboration or the reaching out, or I guess, and I know this is probably a bit of a macro question, and I apologise, but where does one start? What is the decision-making process from it? How do you? I guess the people that you engage with, are they at a certain level? Are they producing it? Are they selling it at a farmer's market? What's the DNA of the people who come, to you and start talking about commercializing their product?
We seem to have two main types of client. The first has too many mango, too many avocado, too many papaya, and they want a solution for that. And so I am in training at the moment for keeping my poker face, because some of the ideas, I just think, oh yeah, olive flavored ice cream. No, that sounds great. Let me point you to the right person. I'll help you with that. But then how do we also start finding things that people are going to eat? So tracking the vegan movement, or tracking Olympics are coming up, and with the Olympics, I'm sure it's like New Year's Eve, everyone will suddenly have an athletic health craze, and how do we tap into that health food market as well? So being able to stay ahead of those trends and making sure we're utilizing too many mango, too many papaya. The second one is people who just have a mad keen passion. And like I said, there's a whole club of people out there who have a special matching outfit because they like chili sauce. There's just as many people, the lavender people. I once went to the Armidale Wool and Sheep Expo, or whatever it was, and the lavender there was, they had their own little outfits and lots of purple everywhere. But, people get very passionate about their particular food. We want to make sure that that passion gets shared in an appropriate manner, where not only are they commercially viable, but they're also making sure that they're collaborating where possible. So let's say I have a mad passion for yoga and helping people relax, and I've got a lavender farm nearby, and then there's a bed shop. How do I get the three of us to work together on a project? And I think that's where making sure that we're connected with those communities, we're making sure we're connected with the networks, but we're also staying up to date. And sessions like today's session are a great opportunity for people to connect and ask those questions and see where the similarities lie.
Absolutely. Talking about connection, a question here from Steve Dummett. another huge supporter of the Australian agricultural ecosystem. Steve asks, are you working with the Fight Food Waste CRC? So I guess, how does the collaboration look on your level with other industry bodies and groups across Australia?
So when Val was working with Fight Food Waste CRC, we were having some conversations there about some projects. Unfortunately, Val left before we managed to make any of those work. One way that we do work with them is very closely with Department of Ag. So DAF through Kerridon Hooker have done a number of projects with Fight Food Waste CRC. Again, we are a very unique pilot plant. So when they were working with Sunripe cherry tomatoes around how they can value add to their cherry tomatoes that didn't make the whole food market, and they made a beautiful smoky tomato relish. When they did their first proof of concept run, they came to our facility and they joined us and worked through our kitchen. So the team from Cooper's Plains in Brisbane brought all of their food scientists and the Sunripe tomato team up to our facility and worked through there. So I would love to work more with the Fight Food Waste CRC, and I see so many opportunities. But yes, we just need to connect more and do more.
Well, it sounds like your agenda's relatively busy right now. I'll jump into a couple more questions here. Comment on how to develop core competencies and how to leverage them to identify new opportunities. From Louise, who's the president of Talga.
So by core competencies, I'm assuming you mean as far as food manufacturing or value adding, do we think?
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So there is a lot that's documented within different commodities. One of the things I'm taking on as a little bit of a project at the moment that I'm excited about is Skybury and their papaya jam. Their quote was about 80,000 to develop that papaya jam. It ended up costing closer to 100 by the time they developed that up. Now that's all on one grower. We were able to assist them by getting funding through regional development, manufacturing and water to do that. But if you think of all the growers out there, and let's say Louise has one of her lavender growers who wants to develop a new face cream, they're going to have to go through that whole process. One of the things I'd love to do is actually work with a commodity group like Talga and say, well, let's develop one recipe for a lavender foot rub. And then anyone who belongs to that industry group, that commodity group, could access the recipe, use their lavender, and then label it however they like. But you would have a tried and true recipe to take to a co-manufacturer and use, or to use yourself. So that's one way I'd like to see those particularly commodity-based core competencies starting up. We do a lot of work with schools. We partner with TAFE. We partner with a few universities also. And we're looking at how we can deliver, particularly in Indigenous communities, more of that food safety, food handling training. When we start talking about Indigenous ingredients, and it's a project I've proposed to Yasmina at Coffee, is that how can we say, all right, we have a community in the Cape and they're out there and they're wild harvesting Davidson plum. Now, just putting it in a bucket and sending it to me to turn into jam doesn't work. So how do we look at the culturally respectful ways of harvesting certain products? Then what's my storage? Is there basic processing that needs to be put on ground when we're actually wild harvesting? At what stage are we harvesting fruit like green bananas, or are we going for ripe fruit? So some of that needs to be documented, particularly in that Indigenous food space, so that we've got best practice and we can start sharing that with communities so they can develop a business around it. But I think it's very much developing the core competencies and how to leverage it comes back to those commodity groups, taking ownership and going, right, we've got lavender, has Talga, and I'm assuming this paper will go through, here's all the products you can make from lavender. And these are all the ways that we can start developing our industry. And then I think it was Louise I saw earlier had a beautiful cup of tea. That's one of the best ways. Sit down with a cup of tea and 3 or 4 people and go, rightio, what else could we be doing? What else can we make out of this and get a bit exciting? We run some fantastic school tours through our facility, and we'll have 30 kids who could be primary school, they could be high school. And we do a bit of a hackathon with them. Well, we'll sit them now with a giant box of avocados and go, all right, kids, the kitchen's yours. What else can I do with an avocado? And they have come up with some fantastic products. So get the kids involved as well. They think outside the square. And unlike us, they're not jaded and cynical about budgets and about, I've eaten that once and I'll never eat it again. They'll give it a go. So that's my tips. Start documenting things and then start thinking outside the square.
That's fantastic feedback. I know what my kids would say if I put a box of avocados down in front of them. The opportunities are so vast and rolling in. Industry standards, I think, the romance that can be attached with the commercializing or the growing and building of an industry or a product versus the industry, the realisms of the industry, commercialization, regulation, et cetera, et cetera. So, a question around industry standards, they don't exist. How long does it take? I guess that sort of question, especially in some of these very niche areas, when you're moving into more consumer facing, how onerous is that kind of next step?
And it also comes back to, and it's one of the things I have a conversation with farmers a lot, is I can make all the mango chutney in the world, but if consumers are not buying it, it doesn't matter how much of an industry standard I have or how perfect that chutney is. At the end of the day, it's got to have a market to go to. Some of the biggest industry standards challenges I face is in this Indigenous food space. So at the moment, the Indigenous food industry is valued at over $50 million, and less than 2% of that's actually owned by Aboriginal people. Now, if you told me that the female-owned food business was worth $50 million and less than 2% of them were women, I'd be rolling heads. And yet within the Indigenous food industry, and we talk about an industry standard, is that a food that was grown on Aboriginal-owned land, that is majority native ingredients? If I have Aboriginal people growing pumpkins, can I suddenly have an Indigenous pumpkin soup? All of these industry standards aren't locked in, and they're very, very malleable at the moment. So what we've decided to do is team up with the likes of Finbar and just put a stick in the sand and decide that this is the spot. And then if someone comes back and says, no, it must have at least 3 wattle seeds, we can adjust that industry standard. But I think the first step is put a line in the sand and decide where you, as a participant in your commodity and your industry, sees that will stand. Like if I'm looking at, say, green ants, no one has done an industry standard. No one even. At the moment, my guys that are cooking with green ants are following the Ergon energy trucks around and waiting for them to knock a tree over. And that's where they're getting their harvest from. So they really are starting from ground zero. It's a case of don't be afraid to sit down, find out who else there is in your industry, and then, what already has happened, but also give that feedback of what works for you.
Yeah, fascinating. An interesting point too around, you can have all the regulations in the world, but if your mango jam doesn't taste very good, you probably need to revisit that as well. So, no, that's just fantastic. So, look, I think
just quickly on that. If anyone's read Seth Godin's work on tribes and so on, and you've got to create that following, and you'll always have those people who lead. And, people who get excited about Apple products before Apple products are released, they're your people. So particularly where Duncan's working, the edible insect field, that's going to be huge, because you're going to have an awful lot of people say, ooh, that's crickets. And I like to feed them the crickets before I tell them there's crickets. But, that's a huge stumbling block a lot of these emerging industries are going to have, is that consumer perception. And having a solid industry standard's great for consumer confidence, but you're also going to have to educate them and bring them with you.
Absolutely. And I remember vividly when I was doing work in agriculture in China, eating crickets in 2013 and a host of other things that I couldn't identify. And that really folds into your comments around, the breadth of dishes that we have and cultures and cuisines here in Australia, and the vast opportunity that we have from Asian cuisine and Western cuisine and native, and there's just this melting pot of opportunities, that we have here, and we're seeing so many of these emerging industries move forward. But that crucial step is, and this is where I think we've seen it a lot, and Olivia and I we've spoken about this at length, is it gets to the stage where there's that next step. You've got the critical mass, or you have the support, or you have the consumer demand, or whatever that is, and then it's, well, and that is always that leap of faith, or the area where we're not quite sure how to do it. And I think the overview that you gave today, Lara, was such a great overview around and encouragement around that next step, as well as tangible ways to do it as well. So What I think
So
I'll do, yeah,
in
sorry,
answer to
please.
Cynthia's question there, just to be clear, we are based in Cairns, but we have clients all over Australia. So I have people who come up from Melbourne and work with us, and we've assisted them to develop their recipe. We've got people in Perth, we've got people in Sydney, Gold Coast, etc. So Cynthia, if you want, send me an email, happy to help you. But in Melbourne, for example, you've got Rocket Cedar with Emma Coath. I know RMIT is doing some great work. There's lots and lots of opportunities there as well. So happy to help you connect with those. Just if anyone wants, flick me an email and I'm happy to pass on.
Fantastic, Lara, thank you. And sorry, Cynthia, I missed your question. I was scrolled up a little bit. So, Lara, thank you for getting that one. I didn't mean to miss that one. Look, huge amounts to digest on that. That was just fantastic, and to our speakers as well. I mean, that was really topical to start with the emerging industries and to finish with Lara's overview around the commercialization and the development of these exciting existing industries that have alternative revenue streams from underutilized, or whatever the terminology that you're using, Lara, not waste. But also, just nascent industries that are starting to gather some traction, and the generosity of you to offer, your access to you and the hub is really kind. And I know that the people on the call today and those that watch the webinar would really appreciate that. So, look, on behalf of everyone, can I thank you so much for your time and insight. That was really invigorating. Knowing that there are people that you championing the industry and industries plural. So. Look, what I will do is I'm going to probably sort of round out and pass over to Olivia. Thank you all for joining for the fourth RD&E. It's been, another fascinating insight, two fantastic industries and a great overview of a sort of smorgasbord of Australian industries and products. And so what I'll do, I'm sure that if anyone would like to get in contact with the participants, I'm sure there will be to reach out to AgriFutures, and they'll be able to assist there. But what I would like to do is just thank you all for joining. I'd like to thank our guests today, Veronica, Duncan, and Lara, and pass over to Olivia just to conclude today's event.
Thank you so much, Al. And look, thank you to everybody that joined us online today. I'm really pleased to now officially announce that we've launched our 2 RD&E plans in this 4th series, so insects and lavender. You'll find that I've popped a link in the chat so you can access those plans in their hard copy form on our website. So I would certainly encourage you to have a look at those. Look, without adding to all the wonderful talks today and summing it up, I'd just like to say 3 words really stuck out for me today, and that was innovations, collaboration and value adding. And I think with all of that we heard today, we've got great prospects for not just insects and lavender that we heard some detail around as high growth potential industry, but we heard about a number of others, and we saw a number of others through Lara's talk, in particular coffee, native foods and jackfruit, just to name a few of the opportunities we have in this rural landscape of, that we call Australia. So a huge thank you to our facilitator, Al Fullerton. Once again, he's done an incredible job of engaging our speakers and our audience. So a huge thank you to you, Al. I'd also like to thank our 2 guest speakers, our guest speaker, Lara Wild, for an incredible talk. And I think the audience will be pleased to know, Lara, that you and I will be talking more when you join us here in Melbourne in the coming weeks. And Lara and I are going to put our heads together because we think Lara can certainly, together with AgriFutures, do more for our emerging industries. And I'm sure you all join me in that thought. And then a huge thank you to our 2 planned launch speakers today, Duncan Roller and Veronica Borrett, for giving us really insightful talks into their industries and into their plans. And we're looking forward to continuing to hear of the growth of these 2 industries. And finally, I'd really love to thank some people behind the scenes that have made this possible. And that's Ellie Reid, our communications manager in AgriFutures. She's done a terrific job in ensuring that we got you know, a wonderful audience today and getting the messaging out there. And also for Kirsty Williams, our stellar Emerging Industries Coordinator, who's really facilitated in the background today as well. So thank you, everyone. Really pleased to have you online, and know that this will be shared via our YouTube channel and also emailed to everybody that is registered. So for those that weren't able to be with us today. So thank you again, and have a beautiful afternoon.